I'm Barnaby Hazen. I'm reading from Misfortunes of T-Funk, Book 1. In a near future vision of Ashland, Oregon, a radical school has opened called the University of Jazz and Music Technology. Two childhood friends and longtime songwriting partners, Theo and Judah, enroll in the program with the idea to use their studies in recording arts as an opportunity to produce their own music. They quickly become entangled with co-eds, complicating matters, and hit about as many rough spots as an amateur band looking for an angle might find along the way. This brings the ensemble to a dark comedy of errors, including a disastrous mini-tour of the Northwest.
Book Lovers Unite. I'm Demethius Jackson, and you're listening to the Chapter 1 podcast. The greatest stories ever written all begin with Chapter 1. In each episode, our guest authors will share their first chapters with you. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Barnaby Hazen, author of the book Misfortunes of T-Funk. It's a musical story about two young people trying to pretty much find their path. Now, what's different about this book is that Barnaby has incorporated some pretty interesting features into his ebook version. So if you're into music or you've ever been an artist trying to find your way, this episode is definitely for you. And it starts right now.
Introduction, 8 years in. You should have gotten into computer code. This was the unspoken charge Walter Brennan faced when subjected to the company of a collection of dilettantes he used to play music with, right up until he went back for a postgraduate degree. He remembered two friends sitting across from each other while he sat at the end of the table, always the one flagging down a server for the next round of drinks. He did not recall which friends, as their faces and specific quotes switched places in his hazy recollection, but one night in particular, two of them were discussing computer languages, quite as if leaving him behind at some barren corner of the 20th century, and he realized he would have to get into higher education if he wanted to enjoy intellectual discourse on music that was of any interest to him personally. As he went deeper into his musical studies, the soon-to-be Dr. Walter Brennan found that catching up with some of those same friends over the phone or quickly over coffee as one passed through town would mostly result in an intolerable line of patronizing compliments about his dedication, instantly tarnished with follow-up comments such as, "Well, I guess you can always get a job teaching." Currently, Dr. Brennan, founder of an unorthodox school combining jazz conservatory with music tech institute, was looking at a computer screen and engaging in shortcut software-fed tutorials on just that, code. It was a basic message board script program, enabling a more detailed look and greater level of control over posts from inside and outside of the university. Since the implementation of an MA program at the University of Jazz and Music Technology, there had been some message board activity needing attention. The forum had in fact gotten out of hand, with cranky old-time jazz heads and snot-nosed punk fusion sophomores having at each other regarding what is or is not jazz and what is or is not still relevant. From the younger generation, the comments had gone from snarky to reprehensible. Brennan was going to have to keep a tighter grip on the activity himself in order to protect the university from parting with an additional stipend for one of the school's tech employees to look after it. Using his very slowly developing toolkit of knowledge, he went right to a few of the comments of concern. One particularly troubling post came from a member called Pentatonic Skankmeister. "You old fucks are wasting our talent. New technology means that I can transcribe a Parker solo in 12 seconds time. The only reason you still make students write out these melodies is because someone had you bent over a music stand while your conductor was probing around in your rectum, and you figure now it's your turn. Eat shit." Brennan followed the video tutorial in trying to find his way to the student. He did this on his personal computer so that he might be able to let the student know he was on to it without calling him in for some tedious meeting involving parents and a condescending bunch of jazzbos from the growing department of sticklers hired when the undergrad administration realized they were under scrutiny for what was showing up for auditions to move on to the MA program. He had a lead, but then noticed a brand new reply to the Skankmeister comment, "Definitely no one on the faculty." "Dear Skankmeister, get off the bong and get back to your instrument. You want to think you're on the edge of something, and the curriculum is holding you back. It's not, and you are not. Either own up to your parents' money and do your homework, little strummer boy, or figure out a way to fake your way through so the department won't catch you cheating. Either way, quit whining, you sniveling little chump. You signed up for this, or you didn't read the program through before you started. Suck bong water. The username was T-Funk. It sounded familiar.
As a musician yourself, I imagine that the story of Theo and Judah is pretty near and dear to you.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I actually got into music, sometime around in like third grade. I picked up a clarinet with at the public school where I was attending, and I went to high school where I now live, moved away, spent many years on the West Coast, and in that time I was performing and recording largely. That's what I was dedicated to. So I have an MA myself in jazz composition and culture. It's a humanities degree, actually. I have been a lifelong musician. I'm now playing professionally. I play here in town. It was funny the way this turned out because I had Theo's character in mind before I started this. I had an idea of, a sort of misadventures type book for musicianship.
So you've done something really interesting with your ebook that I haven't seen done very often. Can you tell us how you added that level of interactiveness into the actual pages of your story?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. Since you can add a link in an ebook, I created a SoundCloud page where when these songs appear in the narrative, it appears as a link in the book. So the reader can choose to click at that point and listen. Now this latest version is, I don't want to get too boring and technical, but
please do.
It was quite a bit of effort to put this version together because I had to do it through through Amazon's. I can't even remember what it's called. It's instructional books tend to want more media along the way, like videos and audio and so forth. And so I've created this version, and it only will work on certain devices. I've listed those on the Amazon description, but it actually has MP3s in the book itself. We'll see how people respond to it. I don't know if that's desirable or not, but I for some reason I got obsessed and I wanted to create this other version, so it's there.
Well, I think it's amazing, first of all, because it's very timely, the fact that we're moving into a new interactiveness with media. We're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, so it makes sense that our ebooks would follow that same path. And it sounds like what you've done is just basically embedded the MP3 files inside of the ebook. Because if I'm not mistaken, an ebook is just an HTML file in general, isn't it?
Yeah, you're out of my comfort zone. I don't, as far as how it's made. Yeah, I'd love to know. I'd love to know more about that. I'd love to get into, to start a whole sideline project in creating interactive ebooks like this. But no, I'm not like Brennan here. I'm not a code guy. I'm not really a computer guy. I just,
Okay, I'll bring it back down. But but I will say, I mean, nowadays you don't have to be that coder or that computer person. I mean, you basically found a hack to achieve the same outcome you were looking for. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's right. As I started developing Theo's character, I started realizing, okay, there's going to be music here, and I'm going to be spending pages describing it, or I'm going to pass it over in abstraction. So instead, all of a sudden it occurred to me, I have these archives of my own, and in this modern age of ebooks, what would it take for me to drop those tracks into the book itself? And it occurred to me, not much. It wouldn't be very hard at all. I can just add SoundCloud links, and then I have this new version that just came out with MP3s that are actually built into the book.
So do you see Theo and Judah as reflections of yourself? Or are they characters that you just had in mind for a while?
They're very different from myself, especially Theo. Well, Theo's a black guy, for one thing. He and Judah grow up in Northeast Portland, and I have spent some time in Portland, but I did not grow up there. So there's the autobiographical element is more to do with that central theme of what it is to want nothing more than to put your music out there. That I have deeply in common with both of those guys, but their paths kind of split. I could say that I borrow more from my my older experience in Theo's character and more from my younger experiences in Judah's character. Judah's the front man, and he's kind of a drunk, and he's very wild and chases women a lot. And Theo's got his act together and is thinking more forward thought and more professionally about, okay, well, how do I make a living out of this sort of thing?
Yeah. I think that's the struggle that we all go through, the two voices on either side of us, so to speak.
Right, yeah.
So what made you finally pull the trigger on this, as opposed to it just kind of being an idea in your head to, okay, I'm going to do it?
When I started thinking about tracks from my past that I might drop into these guys' lives and how they would appear in their story, I did start getting pretty excited, and I probably wrote the text of the book in about 4 months after that. It started all coming together really, really clearly to me.
Well, I think your book format is pretty fitting for the story, because Theo and Judah are actually enrolled in the University of Jazz and Music Technology.
It's kind of a plan that they've mocked up. What we come to find out is they're frustrated. They're not, whatever that is, that whatever they had in mind for getting a local thing together in Portland where they live, it's not happening fast enough for them, and they don't have recording gear. So to get into a place where a professional studio is centralized and part of the curriculum, that was sort of their little plan. And then what happens is Theo gets increasingly into the conservatory part of the university. He gets more and more interested in jazz as it happens, and then that's where their paths sort of split a little bit.
So you also described their music as hard-edged grunge.
Yeah, I used grunge pretty loosely. I just say hard-edged, and kind of progressive is probably more accurate. There's influence there for sure. Judah's vocal stylings, my I guess former vocal stylings that come through are way over the top in places, like Nirvana, Soundgarden kind of thing. And so and having heard those comparisons before, I just went ahead and borrowed it.
Is that similar to the style of music you play personally?
Not at the moment, no. I'm mostly, as I play around town. I play bass for a songwriter named Liz Painter, and I play guitar for a cover band, and so it's more on a professional line that I'm playing for the most part. But I've really been singing. The most singing I've done in the past couple of years has been jazz standards.
Gotcha. So as far as Theo and Judah, the hard-edged grunge that they're going for, I'm wondering, is that style of music part of their struggle?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. when you talk about the tagline of the back of the book is a disastrous mini tour of the Northwest, and it gets into that. Loud music is, you really have to work to find your crowd for that, and if you end up in the wrong room on the wrong night, it can be very miserable.
Yeah, definitely. For some reason, that reminds me of early Alice Cooper, how his whole plan was just to get the parents to hate him, because then the children would love him.
That's funny. That's funny. We've seen so many cyclings and recyclings of pop and rock music. It's just it's kind of dizzying and daunting to me personally. I'm kind of glad not to be in that market at the moment.
Yeah. But when you're up and coming, especially in the music industry, you've got to not only find your audience and your niche, but you've got to find a way to separate yourself from everyone else that's out there trying to do the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some of the other challenges that they're facing? Because they're young adults. So is it a situation where they're trying to discover themselves as people in addition to discovering their musical potential? Or have they gotten some things figured out already?
The musical vision for these guys is pretty clear, until, again, Theo starts to drift. But as a songwriting pair, they've been working the same way for many years. Judah writes lyrics and melody, and Theo tends to harmonize them and add production value. So it's a strong pairing for what they're presenting. It's very different music, and it develops some admiration at the university level right off the bat. People in their circle are into it. And then the challenge for them is outreach, and book 2 will get into more some of the internet tactics they use, the internet marketing tactics that they try to employ. But they're both pretty strong characters, especially Theo. Theo's sort of what we call the parental member. I say that many bands have one member that's responsible. Theo's the one who lines up the booking. He tries to keep personalities in check within the band and this sort of thing.
The designated adult.
Judah, yeah. Judah's a little wilder, but he's very likable, I think. That really book 1 is about establishing their characters. Book 2 is going to get into more. This is set in the near future, so it'll get into more of what's going on technologically in the music industry, and a whole wave of this wave of a new kind of video sort of thing comes out in book 2, and what their challenges are. When they really start to look for an angle, we'll get to see kind of a dystopian future, and I'm having fun with that at the moment.
And I'm curious also to know how the listeners are going to receive their music, and also their fellow peers, their students in the school. I mean, are they receptive to what they're doing, or is everybody just trying to do their own thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, they get admiration, but that doesn't fill a room necessarily.
Yeah.
There's this sort of insinuation that they really would rather Theo be spending his time on something else. So that's a sort of an interesting conflict.
Who is your book targeting? Are you going for musicians or readers in general, young adults?
Readers in general. I think musicians would take a special interest. I would hope that musicians would find it especially interesting, and find things relatable in their lives, or that they've seen other people go through. But it's for actual professional musicianship. If you really master your craft, and you ought to be, and it ought to be all that you're doing. That has slowly gotten more difficult over time, I think, in my opinion, and I've heard other professionals say the same thing. So I don't know. I feel it's maybe calling that up.
Well, difficult. How so?
I don't know if it's well. I don't want to alienate my the people that hire me, but there's this sort of there's a general lack of respect. I think that there are more people who play as hobbyists than there used to be, and they're willing to lowball, and that causes problems, and that sets the bar lower and makes it harder for a professional to distinguish himself to the one hiring. Yeah. Unless they're really hip enough to know, okay, well, this is a pro jazz act. I've got to start them off right away. I got to give them a gig a week for a while to really start a buzz and this sort of thing. So
yeah, you see that a lot in many different industries. I mean, you're basically talking about the diluting of the art. You see that in books. You see that
definitely.
And it makes it hard for professional musicians as well. I was walking through the mall last weekend, and they had a guy playing the piano just in the middle of the corridor, and he was great. I mean, this dude was fantastic, and no one was paying him any attention. And I'm like, man, you have way too much skill and talent to be playing a mall. But maybe that was the only gig he could book.
Yeah, or he needed that extra little bit of income, and that's what happens is you just end up scrambling for everything you can,
Yeah.
That's always been the case. But like I say, the arts are a diluted industry, at least in this country. I haven't tried to make a go of it anywhere else. But that's my interpretation of the situation. That's what it looks like to me. And certainly with the self-publishing, I mean, it's great. I am very grateful to be able to publish as easily as I can. It took me, it took some research and some trial and error and so forth. And eventually I reached out and even got a little help with the formatting of my paperback here. But on the one hand, I'm grateful that it's that independent friendly. On the other hand, it's like it's very daunting. It's like, oh my gosh, anybody can get in there and say I'm an author, you know, and it's like, and many people do, you know,
or an artist.
So, yeah, exactly.
So what is it that you want readers to gain from your book or take away from it?
I hope they find it a good, entertaining read, and to give them maybe some insight, you know, maybe some insight into their neighbor, the musician, you know, the life that they're leading.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss about the book or your process or anything in general?
Let's see. Yeah, no, I just finished the giveaway, so it's out there. I did get back together with some old partners in crime of mine from the College of Santa Fe, where we went to undergraduate school. Some of the guys I recorded with, some of the guys I recorded these tracks with that are being used in the book have started backing me up on my reading. Yeah, so I get so you know, we may play a couple of tunes that appear in the book, but in the middle of that, I'm reading from the book, and they're offering a soundscape behind me, and it was just I did one reading without music when I put out my first book, 7-Eleven Forgotten and Other Stories, and I enjoyed it. But there's just no comparison. It's so cool to have a couple of great improvisers behind me. I'll say their names: Dylan Blanchard and Weston McDowell. To get them playing with me while I'm reading, was very interactive, very cool, and very enjoyable.
Okay, right on. I'll be sure to not edit that part out so they can hear themselves mentioned.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Thank you again for joining me. It was a pleasure having you on, man, and talking with you. Where can readers find you and your stories online?
The quickest way to get to my books is through 711stories.com. And that's all spelled out. There are no numbers. There are no numerals in that. So 711stories.com. That's my website. That's my author website. And we didn't talk about the 711 Stories series or anything like that, and we don't need to, but it's all there. And Misfortunes of T-Funk is featured prevalently upon the page, so they'll find it.
We can bring you back for the 711 stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be a pleasure. In fact, I'm going to put out the next volume is going to consist of band stories, so it'll be a nice. It'll actually be a nice lead-in.
And with that, we're going to wrap up another episode. Once again, that was Barnaby Hazen, the author of The Misfortunes of T-Funk. Glad to have him on. He's a good guy. And if you have any questions for Barnaby or any author that we've had on the show, or you know an author who you think would be a good fit for the show, let me know. Email me at info@ch1podcast.com, connect with me on social media, or check out our website at ch1podcast.com. There you can search through our previous episodes and hopefully find your next favorite author. Our audience is growing every single week. I can tell because I'm starting to get more email requests than I can respond to, but that's a good thing. Please continue to spread the word about the Chapter 1 podcast. Tell your friends, your family, people you meet on the street, the grocery store clerk. There's a story for everyone. Well, that's it for me. You guys stay awesome. Till next time.